and welcome to the 11th episode of the VizWorld Weekly Podcast for May 18th, 2009. So let's go ahead and get started. Starting off first, hardware. This week a new motherboard was announced, the Asus P6T7. That's got 7 PCI Express 2nd generation X16 lanes on it, which means that you can simultaneously operate 3 of NVIDIA's Tesla boards and an additional Quadro at the same time. Now, I can only imagine the kind of power requirements such a setup would require, but it's still probably one of the most highest powered motherboards I've seen in a long time. Also this week, if you've been following Intel's new Larrabee chipset, they just opened a new center in Europe that we'll be talking about later. And while they were there, one enterprising visitor managed to get a snapshot of the die of the new Larrabee chipset. Now, nobody's actually really seen one of these things physically yet. It's just been talked about and whiteboarded. So it's interesting to see that that Intel actually has apparently physically made some of these chips for in-house use. This week, Panasonic and Sumitomo Chemical announced a partnership that will allow Panasonic to hopefully have OLED large screen displays, meaning 42 inches or bigger, sometime in 2010. This is big because Panasonic really has not done much with OLED displays so far. And the fact that they've teamed up with a major chemical manufacturer means that hopefully they've actually got a reasonable chance of getting something to market. It's probably not going to be cheap, but at least it will be available to consumers. Also this week, in the usual AMD and NVIDIA segments, AMD this week revealed the first 1 GHz video cards. We talked about this a few weeks back, that Sapphire was coming out with one called the Atomic 4890. Well, it seems as though Sapphire is not the only one, as this new configuration, which is simply the usual 4890s, factory overclocked to 1 GHz and air-cooled, has been rolled out to multiple vendors and is available from multiple sources. Also this week in NVIDIA, we talked earlier about the NVIDIA GTX 295 and that a single PCB reference design was floating around. Well, the first cards are now available. They're from Inno3D. No word on pricing, but apparently they're available immediately, which is strange to have availability but no pricing. But the cards are out and you can take a look at them on the website. So that wraps up hardware. It's a short one this week. So moving on into graphics. Again, a short segment coming up in graphics here. Cover a few workshops that are happening this week. CG Society has announced a new CG workshop. This time it's ZBrush. It's going to be with Cesar DeCall Jr. on ZBrush for sculpting digital characters. Also, coming up at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects, Marcus Mannanen will be there on May 28, 2009, talking about the techniques and tools used in the making of Kung Fu Panda. He's a big name in the visual effects industry, so it's definitely worth checking out. Free admission for anybody who wants to go by and check it out. A few new software pieces came out this week for those of you interested in graphics. The LuxRenderer is making the rounds. It is an open source render engine. It's physically based, so that makes it very similar to some of the other high-end rendering packages. And there's plugins available for Cinema 4D, Maya, and a few other toolkits if you want to try it out. VRay, another popular rendering engine, has just announced a beta of its first release candidate for Maya. Now, this is not free, but if you buy this release candidate, you can get a $100 discount towards getting the full release version when that comes out in another month or two. That said, it's still $899 for this beta. There's also, for those of you who use Maxwell, they've updated their website with some interesting previews showing what is possible in the new Maxwell Render 2. It's very impressive. They've done some significant work on improving the noise simulations and on vastly improving the render times. So go check it out. And that wraps up graphics. Lastly, let's go ahead and move on into science. Siemens announced a new subtraction-based digital angiography visualization method. Now, angiography is typically a black and white, or at least monochrome, type visualization. Siemens has developed a new technology where they can take multiple images and combine them simultaneously to create some really impressive 3D colored visualizations. They have papers and examples on their website and a nice product brochure you can go check out to see some beautiful images of what they're able to do with it. Also this week, the really big news was that Intel formed its Visual Computing Institute over in Europe. They dropped $12 million on this and it opened this week. There were some huge presentations on opening day, one of which was the Larrabee die chip that we talked about earlier. So you can see that this is a move by Intel to show that they're taking the GPU-based computing initiative very seriously. This center over there is going to be specializing in research and on proving parallel algorithms that use GPU acceleration technologies. There's also an interesting science paper, a sociology study almost, a psychology study, that came out about when virtual reality feels real. Now, they took a bunch of students and reproduced a lot of classic psychological and sociological studies in virtual environments. And the interesting part was that it really didn't matter how realistic the graphics were, so long as the virtual characters within the space exhibited human behaviors that seemed to really suck people into believing that it was real. And they were able to replicate some very creepy old psychological experiments. If you're interested in that kind of thing, they're publishing the paper in an upcoming scientific journal. Hopefully we can get a copy of it and share it with you then. So that's it for this week's issue of the VizWorld podcast. I know it was a short one. I've got big plans for an upcoming special edition that hopefully you'll be able to see this coming up week. So we look forward to seeing you then. See you later. So if you go into a conference, meeting with some vendors, got an interesting animation or video or just a piece of viz that you want to show, contact us. We'd be happy to host it, include it in a segment, and you might even get paid. So feel free to drop us a line at any of the email addresses or links shown on the website. Thanks.